My dear YouTube community, I am back and I'm happy to be with you. I want to talk about the wound of being rejected, And I don't only want to talk about the wound of being rejected, I would like to include some thoughts on preferred children, and I would like to include some thoughts about sexual abuse dynamics, which aren't like, let's say, this obvious in their extension. Let's put it like this. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Christinajunge. I'm a love and leadership mentor. If you like to subscribe, I'd love to have you, and I'll be going deeper into those themes. The wound of being rejected and this playing together with a narcissistic mother. Many times I do not only hear about the cruelty of the dynamics of a narcissistic relationship with a mother, of her being grandiose, of her being totally self-convinced, of her having seemingly the only objective in life is letting down sometimes more of the children, but sometimes only the chosen one, the victim, chosen victim, to empower herself inside of those relationship, of this specific relationship, and to feel herself better, higher, upper, confirmed. And it seems to be also a dynamic where she seemingly wants to avoid getting in contact with her own victimness, and this seems to be easier for these kind of people to victimize constantly another person who is usually somebody with less power. Sometimes we've been talking about these people who had to walk through more abuse, through more trauma, through more, be it narcissistic relationships, that they were sometimes first brighter, nicer, sensitive, more intuitive maybe, and having many very special traits. And on the other hand, it can be obviously asked or turned around the question to wonder about if these traits didn't possibly come up inside of the relationship, inside or posterior to traumatization. I'd like to talk about the wound of abandonment, which is a parallel wound when you have had to grow up with a narcissistic mother. Why would it be abandonment? Why would it be rejection? Because there was somebody who was in charge of you, who you supposed, and everybody else supposed, this is like a natural, like almost, it's a biological relationship, that the mother would be out of her hormonal balance, out of her clear thinking, out of her survival, desire for the survival, be very protective of her children. And this is not the case. And this makes it especially weird, any kind of dynamics, with be it with father figures or with mothers or mother figures, in being violent, being abandoning, being rejecting their children, makes us always question what was going wrong, and the fact that it hurts so much and that it causes so much damage in the victim, put it like this, in the person who was chosen to be the one having to deal with it more, because some children could, for some reasons, get out of it if there were more children around. but it might be how people and how children see it, or their own sensitivity to it. Anyways, how would a mother be abandoning and rejecting to a child, and the child wouldn't notice it, and the child wouldn't think it was something really surprising, or something which was really wrong, really off, and which would really, let's say, shake the foundations of their most basic feeling of security, of attachment, of being safe, right? So the trauma of rejection and of abandonment, they're not necessarily the same, but they can play in very similarly in with a narcissistic mother, are having so many what's the word? How they play out later on in the lives of the victims, that it isn't like a small thing to say, well, she rejected me, she ignored me, she let me down, she would be grandiose for herself, and at the same point trying to minimize me as a person, my identity, my natural growth, and the repercussions this has in the lives, in the building relationships more than anything to a partner, but also building relationships in a work environment, which is always something which still makes a difference, because we're getting again into the hierarchies, into authority, and in how we learn to relate to authority, okay? And so this can obviously trigger in us old wounds where we have known authority or superiors, or people who were supposed to take care of us, to protect us, to be there for us, to provide for us. This can obviously shake our trust and our very deep feelings of self-worth and of self-love, obviously. And this comes out in these kinds of relationships, like close emotional relationships, as well as relationships with authority, or obviously relationships downwards to your own kids, where women or men notice that in the end they have repeated their patterns. They all do. We all learn how to relate to children from how was related to us, how people or caregivers would relate to us. Back then, it is obvious, but if we reject, or if we were much hurt by how we were treated in our childhoods, then it is obviously something we would logically say, oh, well, then I wouldn't repeat this. Then I would be very careful to not enact again those patterns. And it's just not the case always. Many times we just fall into dynamics and fall into patterns and fall into projections, that I project something into my daughter, into my son, what was projected to me. We see this in this entire intergenerational, those patterns, how this comes up. Still a while ago, we were only looking at, for example, alcoholism or severe abuses, which were just more obvious to people, to the community, to the dynamics, to the outside of the house, right? But this has changed a lot in the last 50 years, since we possibly started studying trauma in veterans of the war, in war veterans. Thank you for the correction. And we figured out that psychological trauma, emotional trauma, is a very severe thing, which is not so visible. It doesn't leave bruises, it doesn't leave visible signs, or it's not something neighbors could necessarily listen to, if it's not loud. So nobody notices, nobody sees it when we have it inside of the domestic context. So what I'm going towards is the way children of narcissistic mothers, but also narcissistic fathers, this is still like a little bit of a different dynamic in the gender roles, in the sex roles, of how fathers are, which function they have, and how mothers are there. We can really twist it like a whole lot, saying, oh well, this is like overcome knowledge, so mothers can be this and that and fathers can be this and that. Yes, it can, but we are studying those dynamics right now. We're studying since we have turned a lot in those roles and constructed our identity, which is beautiful because it makes us understand that we are not completely determined. Many studies right now show that a lot of our biological determination triggers how, for example, which hormones are being triggered, which kind of thinking in which situations is being triggered, and this is much connected to our genetics, so this is very interesting. Though we can always change behaviors, which is very interesting. So we can behave women as men and men as women. There's no problem with it. But when we get to the core of the emotional world and to the core of things, we are acknowledging at this point the entire community, the coaching community of relationships, the coaching community of dating, is pointing straight and directly into a direction which promotes a rather traditional image of women and men, which doesn't mean that they are totally exclusive. Inside of roles, we would say, kitchen, church, and the stove, or something like this. For the woman, for example, this is much more widened, but there is something about it. And now we're coming back to the narcissistic mom, and I'm wondering in those dynamics these days, since this has become so important, if because of our let's put it, we were free to change our roles, and we were not only free to change our roles since the sexual revolution, we were also kind of forced to slip into roles we didn't have before. I mean, this is a very complex theme. I don't want to say that women before in more similar, in more simple settings hadn't worked really hard, but the distribution of some things which are relational have been back then more in a traditional role model thinking. I mean, this is just really complex. I get here into something which is super interesting, because there is some things that we say women back then, have worked hard, have worked physically hard. I still knew people on the countryside where women, I mean, they are just, doing work as men do too. But there was something in their hormonal structure and in their self-understanding and in their being able to still rely on men and on family setting and on a safe environment. Not all the environments were safe. There was also abuse, but the extended family system and the neighborhood system was something which pretty much took care of things going relatively smoothly, and that I personally think women and children could be more broader, not there's also obviously marginalized people who maybe weren't able to take care of their children, or weren't able to bring food to the table, or there were women who had children and there was no man around. But it's all turned around right now, that we as women, we can have as many children or not as we want, and we can have them all by ourselves, and we can do work where we are earning more money than men do, and still we are not safe, we don't have freedom. And I'm wondering, this is more like putting this out as almost like a impulse question, like an intent to start a discussion on that, like thinking, brainstorming about what is it, what went wrong, that we are having such a great interest at this moment, not only in narcissistic husbands, or let's say partners, but also in narcissistic mothers. So where I want to get to is when women being so empowered, being so justified in their roles of being able to do non-womanly things with kids, in a mindset of personal freedom, of individuality, of personal growth, and of rights. Okay, when we, and this applies the same actually to men and to fathers, but I want to get into this women's side, and I hope you're not going to kill me for that, but just some reflections on how did we get there, that we are having look at look at YouTube, that narcissistic mothers are becoming such a popular theme, where people are being really concerned about and being really damaged. Now, just some thoughts on where this might come from. If we don't stick to some biological terms, when I have a baby has needs, and a baby needs to be held and needs to be pampered and needs to be applauded to, and needs to be taken care of and praised, and like receiving gratitude, receiving love. And if this was lost at some point in our history, we obviously need to start a discussion about what was going on. Not only that it was there, and that we are searching, having a bigger quest for healing at this point, from narcissistic mothers. Boom. Going back to abandonment and rejection. So, how come that there's so many people on this channel and on other channels who had to live with the fact of realizing at some point in their lives, they might have realized earlier, but at some point we just make a rational understanding about it, that we're like, hold on, when did this start? So how is like this friend's family or some school peer family so different, so caring and so well taken care of, and how is it that I'm becoming conscious of all this hurt that was taking place at some point in my life? Okay. So I get back to, what does it mean to us, abandonment and rejection, this wound? And I was getting out two other dynamics which are really like exploding here in this space, which I really often here combined with the narcissistic mother, with the abandonment and the problems of being able to connect to people, to trust people, to open up, to be there, to receive, to also obviously to speak out, my truth, my rights, my boundaries, my whatever it is I need to speak up for, or to just express my opinion, whatever it will be, or not to talk about expressing my feelings, since they have become so strong and so repressed and so misunderstood. There's so much confusion in a relationship where a mother should have taken care of me, should have been close, warm, safe, consoling, me trusting her and being all the difference, and what it does to a child, and how does that work out in how I learned that people like me and love me, and how do I get in contact now with other people with this mistrust in myself, in safety, in safe relationships, in that there's good, in that I'm lovable, in that I'm worthy, in that I'm having dignity. If there is no foundation of that in my life, how do I want to get into relationships, and what will I find there? And now I'm talking about two dynamics again, picking up, which are the preference of another child, which is many times combined with what I'm hearing, or dynamics of sexual abuse. And this sexual abuse, I don't want to get so much into very severe sexual abuse dynamics, which can be in other situations than with a narcissistic mother, but can be there too. What we many times find is there's minor sexual abuse. There's no minor sexual abuse in this world, okay? The damage it causes on the personal boundaries of a person, on the self-worth, on the idea of what is mine and what is yours, on how close can you come, how much is for me and mine, and can I reclaim this, and how much can you just take, on all levels. This translates later. This makes a huge difference in any kind of sexual abuse, and obviously the more severe, the more damage this causes on a very much wider level. Jumping back from sexual abuse to a combination of narcissistic mothers and preference of another sibling or another. It's not always siblings who are growing up, sometimes it can be somebody else close, who is around in the family dynamics, and this narcissistic mother prefers that other sibling, or the father figure, which is in combination there with the narcissistic mother, does it. And I just wanted to point the dynamic out because it is there, and it is one of the pointed out psychological abuses, which is preference of siblings, and that it does cause damage, and that it is an additional charge on a person, on a child, which had to grow up with a narcissistic mother, maybe even with a form of sexual abuse, be it from a female or a male person, and be it a child, a boy or a girl. So there's a big old myth that people would think that sexual abuse would only occur to girls, or would only occur to girls in a, let's say, severe manner, it occurs towards both, and it occurs from both sexes. As much women as men, not as much, men do abuse sexually more often, but the damage which causes is the same. I know many clients, who have been, as a man, being abused by the mother, for example, and this causing substantial damage in their integrity, in their forming of identity, in their forming of limits, of sane sexuality, and the same with dynamics of a girl being abused by a female figure or by the mother. And this doesn't have to be severe abuse, though, sexual abuse, though it can, If you look at I think the United Nations had, I think in 2002, they had a paper bringing out the what is considered sexual abuse, and it included suggestive looks, to touch somebody or to clap or to slap somebody in a double, minded manner. Sexual humiliation, forcing pornography or really like sexual activities. This is all clear that it goes from very, let's say, innocent, like suggestive looks. It's like, wow, or like, no. This, insinuating that you are a sexual object to this person, or just, plain touching or clapping or, slapping those children is I don't want to say the same damaging, but pretty much in this direction, same damaging as more severe abuse, the personal boundaries and the humiliation it causes are pretty much the same, as the person feels it. Sure, you say, the lame with one leg, thinks his destiny is the worst, but the one who doesn't have legs thinks his destiny is the worst. Of course, I understand this, But when we look individually at how the dynamics are being perceived and the damage it caused in the personal limits, in the personal boundaries, in the understanding of self-worth, in the understanding of having the right to set boundaries, to express opinions, to decide for themselves, to be in full charge of their bodies. This is really like kind of the same regardless of how severe the abuse was. Okay. I do this right now because my microphone was singing the other day, so whatever. Yes, these two dynamics inside of a dynamic of being rejected, being abandoned, feeling this from a narcissistic mom who would probably never admit this, but figuring this out with time, with growing up, with getting an understanding of how we feel with ourselves and what our self-image is, Who do I think I am, or who do I think other people think I am? This is so, so key. And figuring this out in a process of socialization and in a process of trying to understand how relationships work or don't work. Usually we start reflecting on the ways we are attaching to people when things don't work. In every best working relationship, things don't work at times, and we need to work on that. But there is, let's say, an amount of psychological pressure, an amount of feeling or thinking that it is that I am not lovable, that I am not worthy, that that I don't have dignity, which is probably more severe in people who have lived through all kinds of abuses, especially when they were combined with somebody where you could see the difference, inside the same kind of relationships in the house, when a sibling, for example, was preferred, so you could really see that there was something different, something like really a differentiation in treatment, And when we have, and sometimes we have it all combined, and then we're having sexual abuse dynamics, which can be from small things on. But sexual abuse is always an abuse of power. It is never a question about gratification. It is never a question of somebody being attractive or not attractive, or having caused the sexual abuse. This was often a topic, in trying to understand those dynamics. It is simply a domination tool to empower the person who abuses. It's a humiliation tool towards the victim, to get this victim more down and to empower through and over the path of humiliation, of getting a person really a good old step under the own boundaries and dynamics and felt power dynamics, and bringing this over, giving this over to the person who is being abused. It's in itself, let's say, a way of empowering oneself, the person who abuses. And when you get these two dynamics or three dynamics combined, there's so much we have to work on, which concerns our self-worth, our feelings of dignity. And the thing is, when you feel it, it is all normal to you. So you might become aware that there is something and that it wasn't okay, but you can't get to this point where you, let's say, touch, your feeling of unworthiness. It's just there, and it is many times just projected into a relationship dynamic. Of course, you can see it in setting boundaries, in speaking up for myself, in making decisions, in our ways of growing and of thinking that we are deserving of growing, of growth, of having, of being, of feeling, even that, but it is not something you have written in your passport or something like this, So it's much carried around with us, and it is getting worse at the moment we're having combined dynamics. If we're having, be it slight sexual abuse dynamics or be it more severe, of course, having maybe another narcissistic parent within the dynamics, or having the entire family dynamics. In which direction it might go, having a sibling which is being still preferred in those dynamics, although they're all in all dysfunctional. I hope this helped a little bit to understand a little bit about co-happenings which are related to non-protective fathers, mothers, parental relationships, and which make things worse, but which make which make children who had to live through those dynamics also more conscious that there was more wrong going on, and then looking for more help and developing many times more relationship skills to be able to thrive, to deal with it in the first place, first to survive. But there is so much strength which is put into this survival modus in which children of narcissistic mothers or dysfunctional families are being, pressured under. And I just want to tell you to also view this part of abuse. The entire community survival of sexual abuse, of trauma, of domestic violence, of narcissistic parents, of narcissistic relationships. This entire community has forever put an emphasis onto the strength, the coping skills, the self-regulation, the survival modus, and the ability to thrive in victims, in people who had go through these dynamics. They didn't choose that, but what you can choose today is to grow, is to be conscious, is to stay with yourself, is to listen inside, is to try to value yourself, is to try to love yourself, is to try to understand more of those dynamics. And this is what it's all about, to understand that you are not limited, and you were not limited by what people have done to you when you weren't capable of defending yourself, of understanding the dynamics, of looking for help, of intellectually capturing what was going on. So be very aware that you are very strong and that you have developed incredible ways of dealing with life, and that you can thrive, that you are not determined by what has happened to you, all the different. And I want to still point out like a small thing I was right now talking about. It is sometimes not that it happened, because when you heal, it still has happened, but it is how I view it. And when I view myself as somebody unworthy, unloving, as somebody not being loved, as somebody who can't reach her goals, who can't grow because I am determined by others, then this is what I'm possibly gonna live. And this is a real problem, that I, with my mindset, with my belief system of being totally limited and dependent on somebody giving me, opening me doors to move forward, is a complete error in my thinking and in my belief system. So what I'm, I love you all much, I don't want you to get on me, but it's in the end, it is me who I need to understand that I project myself outwards with a feeling of being not worth, with not being able to advance in my life, with no growth mindset, with a mindset which wants to tell me, oh, it was not put into your, into your childhood, so now you're determined, now game is over. And it's just not like that. It's just not like that. I just want to tell you this. It is something I assume. And we need to be very careful with what we assume is there, And to start just getting really over our limitations and understanding them. And what I say, always, always, and always getting into self-love dynamics. It's strange in the beginning when you start up. It doesn't have to be strange. Just start. Just start loving yourself. Each time you see yourself in the mirror, each time you look at yourself, each time you do something, each time you say something, each time you detect that you're like reproaching yourself, you detect that you're in a critic. Thank you for the corrections. Your inner critic is jumping on, right? Each time you notice this, that you're projecting a negative image, that you're self-critical, that you do the same thing what somebody did, although it has become so familiar to you, stop doing it and start with self-love, Start really, really, really active with self-love, and the best is where you see it, where you can touch and feel it, or where you take care of yourself, This is where you can start up, right? And obviously approving of yourself, although you make mistakes. Come on, be realistic. Of course you're making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And being able to receive, being able now to give to myself. We are often so caught in those dynamics that it wasn't given to us. So I keep on repeating those patterns because I'm having like this belief system deep down inside of me, which wants to make me understand that I'm not worth it, I'm not capable of receiving, and so I reject receiving. Because it opens me emotionally and it gets me to a point where I feel I'm not deserving. Get that one? Happy to have you here. I put a link down there if you want to get into one of my coaching programs for inner healing, for healing from narcissistic abuses, for healing from all kinds of abuses, or for just keep going on your path of growth. You're welcome to click for a strategy call, a free strategy call, to see if we want to get into a coaching or mentoring relationship. I'd love to have you. Give me a comment down there if you want to click subscribe, and check out those videos coming up left and right, which are related to this content. I hope it made sense today. So take much care of yourselves, and bye-bye.